As we mentioned, a federal judge today dismissed a classified documents case against former President Donald Trump. In her ruling, Judge Eileen Cannon stated that the appointment and funding of special counsel Jack Smith was unconstitutional and illegal. Joining us now is former U.S. Attorney Paul Charlton, a partner at Denton's law firm. Paul, good to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us. This seemed like it was very unusual and it came out of the blue. What do you think?
It is unusual. It did come out of the blue. And let me take a step back, if I can, Ted, and just start with some of the basics. If you or I were to have classified documents in our possession, store them in, let's say, our bathroom, and then have the government repeatedly ask us to return those classified documents, we would undoubtedly right now be guests of the federal government at some federal prison somewhere. But what changes the dynamic here, according to this judge, is that the special prosecutor who was appointed to pursue this case as it relates to former President Trump didn't have the appropriate constitutional approval by the Senate, advice and consent, and didn't have the appropriate appropriations for funds. And for that reason, she said, I'm going to throw this case out. And she did so, as you pointed out in your introduction, in the face of considerable case law that says the special counsel is constitutionally fit, is a legal and appropriate way to pursue just these kinds of prosecutions.
And that goes back to 1974, the Watergate era, when we first learned about special counsels and special prosecutors. And I think we had it like in 1987, 2019. This thing has come up before. Where is she getting all this?
It was almost an invitation, Ted, in a U.S. Supreme Court decision recently, and you'll remember this, the Supreme Court decision in which the Supreme Court said, former President Trump and all presidents going forward are going to have a great deal of immunity from criminal prosecution. And in that decision discussing immunity, there was a concurring opinion from Justice Clarence Thomas, who sort of out of the blue, and I think it's fair to describe it that way, said, listen, should any other district judge be reading this in the future, there is a mechanism by which I think you should determine whether or not special counsels are appropriately and constitutionally appointed. And so Eileen Cannon, the judge who dismissed this case, turned to that concurring opinion, for which only Justice Thomas agreed or wrote this concurring opinion, latched onto that, and points to that as the significant factor here and why it is she thinks this case should be dismissed.
In reading about this and her decision, it's almost as if she said that in this 1974, this landmark, this precedent, until I guess Thomas made an offhand remark, but the idea that in 74 there was the whole idea that the special counsel could be appointed by the Attorney General and not have any Senate confirmation and all that was just a passing phrase itself. What's this all about?
So she said that the law has changed. She said that the interpretation of the Constitution has evolved. And for all of those reasons, she was going to hold that this special counsel was unconstitutionally appointed. Now, what the special counsel's office has said today, Ted, is that they are going to appeal, and they will most certainly appeal. As you pointed out, she has already, Judge Cannon, already been reversed twice in what it is fair to describe as scathing opinions from the Fifth Circuit, who said you got it wrong, and got it wrong for a court of appeals in a very loud and I would almost say aggressive way. They pointed out that she was incorrect. That may happen again, but there's going to be an appeal, certainly whoever wins or loses that appeal, to the U.S. Supreme Court where, as I said, Clarence Thomas sits and will have an opinion to weigh in on this, all of which is going to take time. And the victory here is not just the dismissal of this case. The victory for former President Trump is the delay, because should he become president in the next election, this case will undoubtedly be dismissed even if it survives all of the appeals.
So, and the bottom line is, she didn't really rule on the merits of the case. She just ruled on whether or not the special, couldn't she have done this a long time ago?
It is peculiar, and she has been subject to a great deal of criticism for that very reason. She is listening to issues that would never really be taken seriously by any other district court judge in my years of experience. She's taking hearings in which she is inviting other parties who are not parties to this prosecution to weigh in. She did so here on this issue as it relates to whether or not the special counsel had authority to prosecute this case. And all of this delay has made some people think that she should be, at least from the Republican Party, including Matt Gaetz just today, saying she should be our next U.S. Supreme Court justice because they believe she has done so well in this case. There are a great deal of people including legal scholars, who believe that's not accurate.
And so the idea that this could be a blessing in disguise in that it could, prosecutors could refile, you could get a different judge out there and things could be different, that's all moot if Trump wins the election. I mean, the first thing he's going to do is to get this out of here.
That's right. And even if President Biden wins re-election and former President Trump loses, the idea that you can get rid of this judge is a very tough hurdle. Knocking a judge off of a case because they are wrong, right, as opposed to misconduct or some sort of ethical misstep, is a very difficult thing to do. Judges are wrong. It just so happens this judge has been wrong multiple times and may be found to have been wrong this time as well.
With that in mind, and last question here, I think it's the last question, I'm not quite sure. This happens 2 days after an assassination attempt. It happens the start of the Republican convention. She has basically, it seemed from a distance, it looks like she's carrying water for Donald Trump, and that's, you hate to say that about a federal judge, but it kind of looks that way. This is not a good look, is it?
It's not, and here's what I believe to be true. First, I assume good faith, that she is doing her best, and it may just be that she's not adroit enough, has not learned enough, she's not experienced enough to do what is right and what legal scholars believe is right in the face of these legal decisions that are highly criticized, including by her bosses, if you will, in the Fifth Circuit. But if there is something untoward, if there is something inappropriate in all of this, it'll all come to light eventually. That is my belief. These things usually do. So let's wait and see what this results in, undoubtedly by the U.S. Supreme Court or by an election, which will keep this prosecution from moving forward at all.
And real quickly, if the next thing that happens might not even happen until November, do you think? What?
No, we're not going to. She's the idea that they've said that the special counsel said that he's going to appeal. The idea that this will be resolved before November is
no way.
I think yes, slim to none.
Paul Charlton, always great to have you on. Great analysis. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Ted.